Hello everyone, welcome to the first of our lockdown lessons, thinking about which poem to start with for the OCR English Literature Christina Rossetti Poetry Unit. There could be only one. We're all stuck in this week. The UK is on lockdown. We're going to begin with Shut Out by Christina Rossetti. Stay tuned. You'll need your copies of the poem, annotated ones preferably. I would normally ask one of you to read it, but it will have to be me today. So here goes. Shut Out by Christina Rossetti. The door was shut. I looked between its iron bars and saw it lie, my garden, mine, beneath the sky, pied with all flowers bedewed and green. From bough to bough the songbirds crossed, from flower to flower the moths and bees, with all its nests and stately trees, it had been mine, and it was lost. A shadowless spirit kept the gate, blank and unchanging like the grave. I, peering through, said, "Let me have some buds to cheer my outcast state." He answered not, but he took mortar and stone to build a wall. He left no loophole, great or small, through which my straining eyes might look. So now I sit here quite alone, blinded with tears, nor grieve for that, for naught is left worth looking at since my delightful land is gone. A violet bed is budding near, wherein a lark has made her nest, and good they are, but not the best, and dear they are, but not so dear. So, what have we got? We have a first-person speaker, unidentified, which arguably allows us to identify with that speaker a little bit more. You might have some ideas about who this speaker is. Certainly critics online and in your reading will have suggested some of the potential identities of this speaker. Could it be Rossetti herself? Could it be Eve? More of that later on. It's a first-person speaker. We've got a tone of a degree of frustration. The tone shifts, I think, through the poem, depending on what she's talking about. And at the end of the poem, there's a sense of depression, or at least a lower mood comes in at the end, where the realities of a situation become apparent. This poem was written in 1856. It was released in 1962 when Goblin Market and Other Stories, Rossetti's first publication, came out. And it was released in a literary atmosphere in which Tennyson, Alfred Lord Tennyson, who we know from Charge of the Light Brigade, was looming large as a powerful literary figure. And I think he influences some of the structural choices, or at least some of the echoes in the structure that we can talk about a little bit later. I think what we'll do is look at 2 or 3 different areas of the poem. We'll look at language and imagery together. We'll look at structure together, and anything else we need to talk about as it comes up. Let's start at the top. We've got a stanza 1 in which a door is shut, our speaker's locked out. The garden is described in stanza 2. A shadowless spirit comes along in stanza 3. I don't know about you, but this shadowless spirit, who's this? Could this be some sort of dementor figure? Could it be Dickens' Christmas Carol, Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come? Is it Christ? Not clear. But this shadowless figure is a looming presence in stanza 3. Stanza 4, we've got attempted dialogue from the speaker, shut down by the spirit who doesn't answer, one of those kind of wordless, shadowless spirits, again a bit like the Dickens version, who builds a wall rather than giving her something to take away as a souvenir. No buds, no twig, no, here's a wall instead, great big wall. And then our speaker is all alone, shut completely out, can't even see the garden. Tears, not really worth crying that much, nothing really worth crying for anymore. Now the delightful land is gone. And then at the end she notices a little bed of violets in which a lark has made their nest, and that's kind of a little bit of solace, but it's not quite the same as the wonderful garden which she has lost. Now in terms of tone, for me, at the end there, the poor consolation of the violet bed and the lark reminds me a little bit of those idioms where we talk about the grass being always greener on the other side, or an absence making the heart grow fonder, that having something denied you increases its perceived value for you. Again, this is fantastically relevant for our current state of affairs, where we look longingly out of the window and remember all the things that we took for granted not so very long ago, that we no longer can enjoy. I think there's a sense of that in this poem for Rossetti. So hopefully you're thinking about the premise, the situation of the poem, and thinking to yourself, what possibly could this garden represent? It seems allegorical. It's not the first time that Rossetti writes about a garden. She writes about it in lots of her poems, and often it's a paradise image, which brings us back to the potential for that speaker being Eve. Now, you know the Bible story, the Genesis. This is I think a kind of Eden garden. We can use the adjective Edenic there to represent Eden. Another term we can use is Prelapsarian, which you may have come across before. Interesting word. Prelapsarian, where this lapse here comes from Latin, which refers to a kind of a fall, the fall, I suppose, capital F, which is the fall of man, the doctrine of original sin, the idea that in the Garden of Eden, this paradise, we had one job, which was to not eat the apple. Eve is seduced by a serpent devil figure. She takes the bite from the apple and persuades Adam to eat from it too. The scales fall from their eyes, they realise they're naked, they're cursed with a kind of self-knowledge, the innocence is lost, the paradise is lost, and they're shut out from that paradise. You know the story. Anything that refers to an innocence that has been lost, quite often will have this term Prelapsarian used about it, or a garden being described as Edenic. So we've got an Edenic garden in stanza 1. I think what perhaps we'll do is we'll just do these different aspects of the analysis as we go through, otherwise it could become complicated. So looking at stanza 1, where we have this Edenic garden presented to us, what jumps out at me, and perhaps you as well, was the way that this is structured to represent a shutting out. We've got this whopping great caesura here, another one here. This seems to almost be the slamming of the door. The image of the door here, the doors normally represent something that open and close, that let you in and out. This is a closed door. This is a one-way door. There's no way in. So there's a horrible ambiguity about the fact that this door's there, but you can't go through it. We have another caesura here. These clearly reflecting those iron bars, where the substance of iron is cold, it's strong, it's prison-like. And saw it lie, my garden, mine, beneath the sky. We've got more caesura here. Separation between the owner of the garden and the garden itself, maybe. And then, interestingly, a total lack of caesura from line 4 in stanza 1 all the way through the description of the garden. Now, why might Rossetti have taken away the caesura from her description of the garden? Maybe because everything in the garden is free and unblocked and flowing and natural, so she doesn't want to interrupt the flow while she describes that, maybe. The other thing that jumped out at me, and maybe one or two of you, was some of the sound effects that Rossetti uses in stanza 1. So there's quite a lot of assonance going on, and one of the key bits of assonance is with that I sound. So she says, I looked between its iron bars and saw it lie, mine, sky, pied. Is that the last one? Yes. So loads of I. Now, why has she created that I sound? Why do you think? Could it be to reflect her personal loss? Could it be to emphasise the personal feelings of the speaker, to identify that speaker as a character? Who knows? The other bit of assonance, of course, that we move on to is this ow sound, bough and flowers, which are used when describing the garden. Now, ow, wow, 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 has got quite a lot of vivacity to it. It's quite a lively sound, so maybe that's in contrast. we've got this lovely description of the garden, this Edenic garden that starts at line 4, stanza 1, and goes right through stanza 2. The garden's pied with all flowers. Pied here is multicoloured. Pied piper of Hamelin, pied wagtail, pied kingfisher, multicoloured. Often used about black and white, but also multicoloured. It's pied with all flowers, bedewed and green. Now this garden is almost too good to be true. We've got all flowers, not just the seasonal variety, but all flowers, stuff that grows in spring, like the daffodils that you've seen at this time of year, and the stuff that pops up in the winter, the crocuses, the snowdrops, the things that are in the height of summer. They're all flowers. We've also got a garden with moths and bees. Now, this moth here is not the horrible clothes-munching variety that you hunt down mercilessly. This is the feathery antennae, comes out at night, amazing, fat, pollinating moth that you might not have seen. Moths and bees. Moths are nocturnal. Bees are diurnal. They're not supposed to be in the same place at the same time. This is not a suburban garden. This is a too good to be true garden. This is paradise, perhaps. Stately trees, all its nests. It had been mine. Boom, there's another caesura. And it was lost. Again, the separation of the lost and the lossee. A shadowless spirit kept the gate blank and unchanging like the grave. You might have noticed the rhyme scheme, the way that this is structured. It's super regular. We've got regular stanzas, 7 of them. The rhyme scheme too is super regular. The door was shut. I looked between its iron bars and saw it lie. It's got iambic written all over it. If you've counted them, it's tetrameter, so it's not pentameter. It's 4 lots of iambs. Iambic tetrameter. Was that spelled right? I think so. Iambic tetrameter. So it's 4 lots of iambs, an iamb being a 2-syllable sound where the emphasis is on the second. Titum, 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 titum. And that's regular all the way through, except in 1 or 2 places. And perhaps you spotted this too. We've got a break to the tetrameter, the iambic tetrameter here, in line 2 of stanza 3. And again, in here, line 2 of stanza 4. Blinded, yes, here. It's not blinded, it's blinded. That's an iamb again, we're in. So we've got a few places where that regular restrictive pattern that repeats is interrupted. So why does she do that there? Blank and unchanging like the grave. Well, blank is a blank like the grave. So the first of these interruptions on the word blank, you might remember this, that the word for an inverted iamb is a trochee. So the first of these trochees, trochee, Trochee, on the word blank. Blank. It's a barrier word. This spirit is not having a chat. The word blank is like a raised hand here. The emphasis is on the first half of the syllable, not the second. So the trochee, blank. Where's the next one? Mortar. He answered not, but he took mortar. Mortar is the cement that is the stuff that you put squash bricks together with. And mortar and stone. This is a real concrete barrier. The specific word for that stuff that you build with is the trochee. Again, another barrier word. Another trochee here. And the last one, blinded. So now I sit here all quite alone, blinded with tears. So if we're following the same theory that trochees are blocking or a barrier, it works with the fact that we've got it on the word blinded. So going back, let's see what she tries to say. Okay, well, first of all, let's finish this line here. The simile that Rossetti uses, just to make sure that we've got no illusion about this shadowless spirit, is that it's blank and unchanging like the grave. Now, Christina Rossetti is not frightened of death allusion. She writes about it a lot, sometimes quite longingly, and often in a visually rich way. Here we've got a blank, an unchanging spirit like the grave. This is almost a Gothic spirit. Remember the Victorians with their love of ghosts and darkness and shadows and things like this. This is a shadowless spirit. Who knows what it is? I, peering through, said, "Let me have some buds to cheer my outcast state." That word outcast there again reminds me a little of Eden. It's the kind of language that's used in the Bible to talk about being cast out from the garden. It's buds that she wants for her souvenir. Why buds? They grow their new life. Maybe she's wanting some hope. Give me something to look forward to. He answered not, "Thanks, spirit," but he took mortar and stone to build a wall. This wall it's never good, is it, these kind of walls? He left no loophole, great or small, through which my straining eyes might look. Let's notice the rhyme scheme here. We've got an A, B, B, A rhyme scheme, which if you've read about this poem, you might have come across some quite interesting theories about this particular rhyme scheme, which was really popular during this period. A few years before Rossetti writes this poem, Alfred Lord Tennyson writes In Memoriam for a great friend of his who died. It's a great, huge book-length poem. And he uses this A-B-B-A rhyme scheme throughout the whole thing. And one of the things it does is, if you use your imagination, it's almost a really locked-in kind of rhyme scheme, because the A to the B looks like it's making some progress, but then the B gets stuck and goes back to the A again. So it's quite a confined and frustrated rhyme scheme, and that confined and frustrated tone suits this poem really, really well. So we took wall, small, look. Okay, A, B, B, A. Where's it go next? So now I sit here quite alone, blinded with tears. There's a caesura, as if the trochee's not enough, we've got a caesura in that line as well. There's like two lots of barrier in this line. Blinded with tears, nor grieve for that, for naught is left worth looking at since my delightful land is gone. What's the point in crying? I can't feel anything anymore, my God's gone. Then she noticed this violet bed conveniently budding nearby. So it's violets and they're budding. So we know the Pre-Raphaelites like to load their visual art with nature and symbolic nature. We know that Rossetti will often use nature symbolically. So you've looked up, and I know this from your annotated poems, you've looked up violets. Well done. It does mean faithfulness, or fidelity or faithfulness, faith maybe. So a violet bed is budding near. So the beginnings of faith are growing again, wherein a lark has made her nest. Now I don't know if you've seen this bird's name before. It's also called skylark, of course. It's a small, brown, unprepossessing looking bird, but when it gets in the air, late spring, early summer, it goes so high it kind of disappears. It's such a tiny little bird. You can't see it, but you can hear it. It's got this amazing sound that just bubbles and flows. It's kind of a liquid kind of sound. It's a really lovely, a really beautiful thing, a real English countryside thing. It's written about a lot by the Romantics, and the Pre-Raphaelites allude to it as well. It crops up in lots of poetry. The skylark, very beautiful. So larks made her nest. The lark represents, because of its beautiful, lively, vivacious flight and song, represents life and hope. So we've got budding violets of faithfulness, in which a nest is budding some new larks, and not just any birds, but skylarks. And good they are, but not the best, and dear they are, but not so dear. And so we talked earlier about the fact that this is great and everything, but it's not as good as the garden. She's got her faith, perhaps, she's got her hope, perhaps, but it's not as good as that prelapsarian state that she's lost. Right, that's almost going to be it. There's one more thing that I'd like to point out for you, which is quite a nice, perhaps new bit of technical vocabulary for you, maybe not, but it's this idea of an I rhyme. And it's not a failed product from Apple, it's a... Right. Now, an I rhyme is where something looks like it should rhyme, but it doesn't. So there's a couple in here, I think. We've got door, shows a highlighter. We've got a door here with its double O, and we've got looked. Now that double O looks like it should rhyme, but it doesn't. It's an I rhyme. Rhymes to the eye, but not to the ear. There's another one down here with a loophole. Where's the loophole? There we go. A loophole and look. It's an I rhyme. It looks like it should rhyme, but it doesn't rhyme to the ear. So you'll be thinking to yourself, so what? You should be thinking, so what? Because we don't just spot things without having an idea to go with it. What's the I rhyme for? Why has she done it? What could we get from it? Could it be another sense of frustration? Could it be another sense of separation? Could it be an alienation? You see loophole, you see look. You imagine they might sound the same, but of course she can't look through the loophole. There's a broken thread of meaning there. There's a door. You should at least be able to look through it or go through it. You can't. It's broken. So those I rhymes I think are an extra element in the sense of blocking that goes throughout a poem, which appropriately is called shut out. Okay, so before we finish, let's have a look at some of your annotations. I'm only going to have time to look at the first 2 or 3 that were sent in a couple of days ago. I know that several of you have sent in work since, and I'll put those on a rolling slideshow at the end of the film, so you can have a look at what each other spotted. But I want to start by looking at Miss A.'s. Oh, look at this, AO3, beautiful, written at the top of the page. Now, AO3 brings me to your task, as it were, or your challenge, which is to look for elements of context to which we can connect this poem. There are several readings of this poem, and I know that from some of your work you've chosen to use 1 or 2 of these readings. There's the religious reading. There's also, of course, a feminist reading. I'm looking to you then to come up with some connections between the premise of this poem, the feeling of this poem, and what it is that Rossetti is saying in it, and what's going on in her world or in her life. I don't want straightforward generalizations about her Christian faith or her version or brand of feminism. I'd like you to have a dig and see if we can find as much detail as you can, so we can really nail what the relevance of this feeling is to her at that point in her life. So Miss A's, we've got lots of shutting out symbolism in stanza 1. We've got the sexual connotations of garden. I suppose anything that's fertile or growing or lush or natural in the way that a garden is could have sexual connotations. I'd be interested to know whether you see any more of that later in the poem. So lots of natural imagery being spotted in stanza 2. Do we appreciate what we have is the question that's rhetorically asked here. A great question, and it does echo with that sense of the grass being always greener, or absence makes the heart grow fonder, that I spoke about earlier. Miss A here talks about collocation, the idea that this phrase is located in an order that makes sense to us. She's not inverting that, she's not messing with that collocation. There's no barriers to the flow when Rossetti's talking about the garden. What else? Religious connotations of the spirit. Yeah, absolutely. She's feeling hopeless. She's desperate. Are women not meant to be heard? Okay, there's a beginning of that feminist lens here. Is Rossetti being is this the woman who's been shut out of some sort of paradise here? This is a cold man. Okay, good spot. So this is a gendered spirit. This isn't some random sort of amorphous spirit. This is a male spirit, which again sits nicely with that feminist lens. The spirit's got more power, more significance. Men further shutting out women. No mention of nature in this stanza. That's a good spot. Where else am I going up here? She's quite alone, can't read it, green pen. Lost and alone, symbolic of her feelings in society. Nice bit of context. Naught is left worth looking at. Has she abandoned hope on life? She's got no place in society. Delightful land is gone. We know how that feels. Women are fragile. Their places in the home. Okay, very clearly from Miss A, this is the context that you're going to want to write about. Is this as a woman speaking about being shut out from something? Okay, let's look at another one. Okay, this one is from Miss L.A. Handwritten, nice. Okay, beautifully neat, much neater than mine. Okay, so the positive tone in that stanza 2 has been highlighted here. The nature imagery, lots of love for that nature imagery. We've got that religion question mark on the shadowless spirit. Asking for the bud to cheer her outcast state. Could this be a reflection of her desire for direction, or her desire for some sort of answer, some sort of certainty? Is she feeling lost at this point of her life? Okay, you've said that the range of punctuation might suggest some sort of the diversity that's being seen or had been glimpsed in the garden, which is an interesting idea. That mortar, the blinded by tears, is this all a kind of reference to the Industrial Revolution or the death of nature? Anxieties around the death of nature that was part of the Industrial Revolution. And then in the final stanza, yes, so Miss A has spotted repetition. It doesn't say what that repetition means for her. Maybe you could think about that. Okay, is this a poem about her love for nature? Is nature the certainty in the crazy turmoil of her life? We've seen that idea before. Things that carry on are a sense of comfort. Now, this might be a stretch, but you might have looked out of your window and seen nature taking a bit of a breath in the last few days. Maybe you've been noticing the bird song a little more. Maybe there's a little bit more space out of your window to notice a few buds on the trees, the daffodils. It's definitely, the air's a little fresher, the sun's out, which helps. There may be some comfort for Rossetti, like us, in seeing that nature carries on. Yeah, good idea. Let's have a look at another one. Okay, this one is from Miss B.Z. Lots of notes. Where do we start? Wow, look at that. Okay, nice idea for the rhyme scheme, that the idea that it's under tight control and that enclosure. She's not going anywhere, but she's stuck. Yeah, I like that idea. What else can I spot quickly for you? I'll put these on the slideshow at the end, so you can pause them and have a little look and see what you think. The religious imagery of the garden. Nature's commonly compared to paradise and freedom. Okay, I've got time for one more. I've chosen the first 4 that came in after I set the task. Now this one is from Miss R.A. and she's using some future tech where I'm not sure you're going to be able to see her annotations in the rolling slideshow at the end, but just to give you a sense of what she's spotted, she's used a very nice bit of software to create some annotations on this. So I'll click on a few and let you know some of her ideas. So we've got the iron bar imagery in the garden. She's barred from the place they admire. From the speaker's barred from the place she admires. We've got the caesurae, nice plural of caesura. Absolutely right. Let's click on this one. What's it say? Pied with all flowers, return to nature. The speaker is caged, can only see the true value of nature from being locked away. Reinforces it had been mine and it was lost. Reinforces the idea of freedom being lost. Then a shadowless spirit, click. Supernatural, ties in a sense of unclearness. A shadowless spirit. Or give me then but one small twig. What have you said here? Desperation. The speaker is subject to the shadowless spirit. Reference to perhaps how Rossetti was also tied down by society's abhorrence of a woman's freedom. Yeah, we talk about fallen women in this period as well, don't we? That whole idea, the Eve characterization of women is a uncomfortable part of that Victorian attitude towards women, that sense of misogyny. So mortar and stone to build a wall. The use of the word wall symbolises isolation and seclusion. It suggests perhaps the effort mankind will go to in order to cage all that is an unfamiliar concept. It's a nice idea and nicely expressed. Blinded with tears. Biblical reference could suggest the speaker's view is completely obscured. The last The last 3 quatrains create a desolate tone as if nothing holds any significance anymore. And she goes on. Great stuff. Now, lots of you did send in annotated poems, so I'd like you to have a chance to look at them. But those are a glimpse at some of your great ideas. We'll share them. That's how we do it. Okay, I think that's all we need to do. Now, as I say in the channel introduction, this is not by any means a complete or exhaustive analysis of the poem. There's lots of other ways this poem can be read. It's one of the things that we love about poetry, that there's no right reading. Whatever your reading is, you need to be prepared to link it to language, form and structure and the context that we are learning about Rossetti's life and the Britain that she lived in, the things that she was thinking about, the stuff she might have read, the influences on her. So your task then, as I mentioned earlier, is to create maybe a paragraph or 2 that we can keep that establishes what is your reading of this poem, what's your interpretation of the garden, who's the speaker, what's the relationship between those 2 things, how are you going to link that to, how are you going to link your idea to Christina Rossetti's context, whether what was happening to her at the time or what was happening in the world, the wider world at the time. And that'll be a really useful thing to come back to when we put an essay together, looking at this poem and comparing it to something else. Don't forget to use your thematic grids. You should have something like that by now. If you don't, make one. All the themes that come up in her poetry, you can add the poems to the grid and see which other poems they fit with. Do that now before you forget. Next week we'll look at something else. Haven't decided what. If you have any ideas or comments, to put them. If you're one of my students, you've obviously got another channel of communication with me via email or the online learning platform that we use. If you're not one of my students and you've stumbled across this, then feel free to use the comments. I'll answer as many questions as I can or respond to as many great ideas as I can. Okay, hope that was useful. Let me know if it was. Next week we'll have another poem to look at. Meanwhile, keep studying, keep looking out the window, wash your hands. All the best. See you soon.